my name is Kim Wilkins, and I'm a tech activist. I wasn't always a tech activist. I used to just really like tech, and I worked in tech, but I didn't see a need to fix anything or advocate for change. So let me tell you a story. I've always loved tech. It started when my dad brought home a TRS-80 computer when I was in high school. The games were fun, but I was never as good at them as my brother was. What I loved was learning how to do basic programming and being able to type my papers faster than anybody else I knew. I started college as a math major. I happened to take an intro to computer science course as an elective, and I fell in love with being able to take control of the computer and have it do my bidding. I started work at IBM as a co-op in college and then was hired after graduation. I was a very ambitious young woman. Very early in my career, I wanted to get into management, and I was lucky to find a female mentor who helped me, took me under her wing and helped me get on that first rung of the corporate ladder. In 1998, I had my son. My grand plan was to be back to work after my 6-week leave. All did not go as planned. We moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. I quit my job to stay at home, and I became a freelance design and test consultant. I feel like I literally stumbled into teaching. I had a friend who helped set up a gig for me to set up a computer lab at her school. And then the principal there asked me if I wanted to teach technology. I'm still not sure why I said yes and why he offered a completely untrained person the job, but I'm so glad he did because I fell in love with this new vocation, especially working with middle school students. So no, I wasn't always a tech activist. I just really liked tech, and I worked in tech, but I didn't see the need to fix anything or to advocate for change. That was until I went to the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing. Like many of you coming to Vste, I went there to learn about the latest tech tools and curriculum that I could bring back to my school. And I did learn about that, but I also learned about a very disturbing trend in computer science education and the technology careers. Can you guess what it was? It's that number right there. That number has haunted me since I first heard it. See, I naively thought that things were going pretty well for women in tech. But instead, I learned that when I was in college was the height of women studying computer science, 37%. The year I went to that conference in 2010, women only made up 18% of computer science graduates. And if that wasn't enough, I learned that pay was still unequal and the high-value, high-impact jobs were mostly held by men. It made me so mad and sad and frustrated, and I wanted to know what the hell happened. Because technology is fundamentally changing the way we work, govern, communicate, and educate, and yet girls are 5 times less likely than boys to consider a career in technology. So what did I miss? Let's rewind and see. NPR's Planet Money did a story called When Women Stopped Coding. And one thing they found that when those first PCs made it into the home was a decisive factor in more boys studying and excelling in computer science than girls. Maria Clave, president of Harvey Mudd College and the champion for increasing women in tech, came to a very similar conclusion that she shared at a Grace Hopper conference. She believes that many of the stereotypes we've got in computing came when those first PCs came into the home in schools. The first games were shooting games because that was the easiest thing to code with the very limited resources of those early PCs. That grabbed male interest, and they grabbed the PCs. So a big thank you to my dad and brother who did not lock me out of that clubhouse. I started college as a math major, but an encounter with a math professor turned me off to that subject. I went in with a problem, and he told me my whole gender struggled with this. Seriously, dude, isn't this 1984? I went to a small liberal arts college, so there weren't a lot of math professors to choose from. Luckily, I had taken that computer science course as an elective, and based on that experience, I changed my major to computer science. When I started studying computer science, all my professors were male, most of the students were male. When I started working at IBM, a majority of my coworkers were male. The few women in leadership seemed to approach their rise up like most of the men, looking forward but not really looking back to see who they could help. Luckily, I found a female mentor. And against the advice of the mostly male managers, I left development to work with her in publications, most definitely not seen as a step up. Within 18 months, I became the manager of the publications team, younger than all my employees. I soon added some developers to the team, and eventually I became the release manager, responsible for all phases of the product development of a major product release. For about a dozen years, I had a thriving career at IBM. After being a release manager, I became a product planner, and that opened up the world to me because I got to travel to share the good news about our product. My final job at IBM was test manager for the game development division. Yes, it turns out you can make a living playing video games. However, I soon became another troubling statistic about women in tech. After about 12 years, approximately 50% of women leave their jobs in STEM fields, especially computing and engineering. Just to put that in perspective, that's twice the quit rate of men in tech. By this point, I began to finally sense that things were not quite right in the tech world. Here's what I wrote in my blog when I turned 40. For several years, I was humming along quite nicely in my feminist cause. But then I had a child, left corporate America, turned 40, and had a huge identity crisis. I had done well in a man's world, but now I found myself in the world of motherhood. What was happening to my feminist agenda? I thought I was helping pave the way for more women to be treated equally after me, but instead I was just playing by the rules of corporate America, and they no longer seemed adequate for my life. I felt like a rebel without a clue. Needless to say, what I learned at the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing Conference really rocked my world. If you're familiar with the hero's journey, this was my definite call to adventure moment. At this point, I could refuse the call, or I could become a reluctant hero. So that's the beginning of my story, but I wonder what your story is, or what your student stories are. Where are we all on our hero's journey? Because let's face it, there's no shortage of problems facing us. And I believe that the solutions will largely involve some sort of technology. This past October, I went on my third pilgrimage to Vste in London. Vste is an annual tech conference that Mozilla puts on, but it's really hard to describe because it's different than any other tech conference I've ever been to. This year, it was a space where internet health issues were being addressed and their larger implications for society. They were acknowledged and being actively addressed by a diverse, committed, and growing group of people. There are 5 key components of internet health that Mozilla is working on, and there's some good news and there's some bad news. Privacy and security. The internet only stays healthy if we trust it as a safe place to explore, transact, connect, and create. Our privacy and security online is under constant threat. The good news, hundreds of millions of people are taking charge of their personal web experience by installing ad blockers. The bad news, 91% of adults agree that they have lost control of how their personal information is collected and used by companies. Openness. The internet was built on the promise that any one of us might create the next big thing. But in order to keep creating and imagining and reinventing our future online, the building blocks of the web must remain open to all. The good news, there are now an estimated 1 billion Creative Commons licensed works online that encourage reuse, including text, photos, and music. Bad news, people are getting cut off from other viewpoints because of the digital bubble they are living in. Decentralization. The internet owes much of its success to openness. Its open, shared structure has made it easy for everyone to build, surf, and thrive on it. But a few big companies are closing doors, and creating walled gardens that concentrate their ownership and control of the web. Good news. As of December 2016, 47 countries currently have laws in place to protect net neutrality. You probably know the bad news. On December 14th, the FCC will vote to replace current rules enforcing net neutrality. Digital inclusion. The more voices, perspectives, languages, and people contributing to the web, the richer the experience for everyone. But the whole internet is not yet accessible, welcoming, or safe for all. The good news. Wikipedia continues to be a free fountain of knowledge to the tune of 16 billion page views a month in 284 languages. Bad news, 73% of internet users have seen someone harassed online and 40% have experienced it personally. And finally, web literacy. People everywhere should have the knowledge they need to tap into the full potential of the internet and use it to make their lives and the world better. This means everyone needs to be able to read, write, and participate online. Good news, the growing trend towards integrating coding into the core curriculum across the United States, especially Virginia. Bad news, 82% of American middle schoolers assessed couldn't tell the difference between an ad labeled sponsored content and a real news story on a website. And that's just tech-related problems. What about all the other problems? Addressing climate change, equal access to education, eradicating poverty. We live in a world with a lot of problems, but we also live in a time with powerful technology tools to help us create solutions. As technology educators, we possess a superpower to inspire the next generation in technology. And with great power comes great responsibility. That may be a line from a comic book superhero's uncle, but it's no less true in reality. How do we super-empower teachers and students to tackle these real-world problems and wield their technology powers for good? I'll share some things I've learned as a superhero in training, working with students and teachers at St. Anne's Belfield School, Tech Girls, and beyond. First, I want to share a framework that's been super helpful on my journey. It's called the design thinking process. It's a way of looking at a problem from the point of view of those it affects, and then iterating on solutions. I first heard about the design thinking process alongside students in the Biomed Tech Girls program. More about that story later. First, what is design thinking?
Hi there. Have you noticed that the world is full of problems? There are big, hairy problems, like poverty and disease, and small annoyances like misplacing your keys. However, the geniuses at Stanford have come up with a process that will broaden your perspective and help you create better solutions no matter the type of problem. This process is called design thinking, and it's here to change the way you tackle problems. Design thinking encourages people to explore new alternatives, creating options that had not existed before. Design thinking is successful because it focuses on the needs of the user. It's more than just good ergonomics, it's about understanding the context and culture of the stakeholders involved. This understanding is found using direct observation and qualitative data, which produces stories that people can really empathize with. Once the research is conducted, the problem solver is more apt to define what the real problem is. After diagnosing the true problem, it's time to ideate or brainstorm new ideas without the constraints of existing solutions. Because design thinkers learn by doing, these radical ideas are then made into simple prototypes that test possible outcomes. Rapid prototyping speeds up the innovation process because we only learn about the quality of our ideas when we test them in the real world. The process of ideating, prototyping, and testing is repeated early on so that mistakes are quick, cheap, and ultimately lead to success. So, why design thinking? The process provides a method and a unifying language for multidisciplinary collaboration, leading to greater creativity and better solutions faster. Suddenly, the world's problems are simple and manageable with design thinking.
As I was preparing for Vste, a colleague shared a version of the design thinking process created by the Mount Vernon Institute for Innovation, specifically for use by K-12 educators and students. I'm going to use it to tell my story, and I hope you'll consider using it in yours. The first step is discovery. This is a stage of researching, observing, and immersing yourself in your environment, looking for what's not quite right. What problem catches your eye? For instance, once I learned about the gender gap problem in tech, I could not stop thinking about it. In fact, my family will tell you I became kind of obsessed with it. I would talk to family, friends, colleagues, teachers, students, strangers on Twitter, pretty much anywhere and with anyone who would listen. When I went to get my master's in education, I bent any project I could towards studying this problem. I discovered so many things. So what I'm wondering is what problem is haunting you? Maybe it's something you're already working on or passionate about, or maybe it's an idea lurking in the back of your mind. Whatever it is, it may seem too big and too overwhelming to even think about solving. We're going to need some superpowers. After a lot of research and a lot of talking to people and a lot of soul searching, I founded Tech Girls in 2012 with a mission to empower girls to imagine and achieve their future dreams in our tech-savvy world. In 2013, I went back to the Grace Hopper Conference to learn and reconnect. At that conference, I had the opportunity to hear Anita Jones speak. Wow, did she blow me away. I learned that she's a computer science legend who broke glass ceilings in academia, government, and corporate America. When I got the opportunity to meet her in person, I just couldn't hold back and said, I'm starting Tech Girls, I want to solve this gender gap problem. And she called me audacious. I cannot tell you how empowering it was to hear that from one of my new heroes. Because as a part-time student and a part-time teacher and a full-time mom, I was not feeling very audacious. But as the founder of Tech Girls, I could do that. I decided audacity would be one of my superpowers. I also figured out pretty quickly that change involves stepping out of my comfort zone. You know, like sharing my story in front of hundreds of people. And it turns out I have this really fantastic out of my comfort zone detector. And when it goes off, it freaks me out. This, I have discovered, is another superpower. It's a not so subtle way that one part of my brain says, hey, that sounds super scary, and another part says, so you should probably go for it. If you're like me, you may not think you possess a superpower, and sometimes they sure aren't obvious. So I tried an experiment. I crowdsourced a list of superpowers at Vste. I tweeted out requests to think about someone you look up to and share the qualities you admire about them on a Padlet. My hope is that we can use this list to acknowledge the superpowers we see in each other. Let's take a look at what we got so far. I think we need to add a lot more. But I think that this list reminds us that we've all got potential superpowers within our grasp, and that also we can't possibly do this superpower stuff alone. We need a team. When I started thinking seriously about founding Tech Girls, I wrote a blog post about my idea, and I tweeted it out far and wide, tagging girl-focused organizations, because I wanted their expert opinions. Through that, I got support and connections with Black Girls Code, Girl Develop It, Tech Chick, Cyberjetsu Girls, and Greek Girl Diaries. Ironically, it was also through social media that I made connections in Charlottesville with people who wanted to help. I met the first member of the Tech Girls team on a 10-miler training run. See, I told you I would talk about this with anybody. She was a high school junior, and she wanted to join up right away. With her help, I was able to connect to a teacher who opened the door for us to hold our first meetups at her school. Finding and engaging supporters, collaborators, and cheerleaders became a critical component to making Tech Girls work. The next phase of the design thinking process is to empathize, to walk that mile in someone else's shoes. I didn't know about the design thinking process when I started Tech Girls, but I did know that I needed to understand the problem from the girls' point of view. I started looking for opportunities to connect with girls and learn from them. I asked the girls what they thought the problem was, and I heard things like, there's a lot of peer pressure to be cool, and computer science is definitely not seen as cool. Computer science sounds complicated and boring. There's so many bad stereotypes out there about computer science, like showing interest in computer science means you have no life. I also looked for alternate realities in their world to help them address the problem. They'd like to see more female role models in technology. They need help understanding that computing is more about people than computers. And we need to associate computer science with positive and fun subjects. This feedback was invaluable in creating programming for Tech Girls. In 2014, the perfect job found me, K-8 computer science coordinator at St. Anne's Belfield School. Even though I was full steam ahead with Tech Girls, I just could not pass up this opportunity because I believed it would be proof of concept of another avenue to help solve the gender gap problem. I just had 2 requests before signing on. Tech Girls would still be a priority for me, duh, And we would share everything that we learned on our journey to integrate computer science into the classroom. A research study from the Girl Scouts reported that although 74% of teen girls are interested in STEM subjects, they don't pursue this for 3 reasons. They don't believe other girls their age are interested in STEM careers. They're uncomfortable being the only girl in a group or class. And they feel they have to work harder than their male counterparts to be taken seriously. If everyone in a class is exposed to computer science, then they're all empowered to move from becoming technology users to creators, collaborators, and activists. My job is to integrate computer science into all the K-8 classrooms, but I knew from previous experience that asking a teacher if I could bring computer science into a project or lesson was asking them to take a risk. I found that if the idea of integrating a new technology into the curriculum is anxiety-inducing for an educator, add computer science to the mix, and the anxiety goes up tenfold. The fear of change and not being able to keep up in the midst of rapid and rampant technological advancement is very real. Educators are dealing with these paradigm shifts brought on by technology use inside and outside the classroom. Meanwhile, youth continue to find new and inventive ways to use technology with or without our guidance. Acknowledging this fear and the need to work within the unknown is key. Sometimes I need a good quote to get me through my fear. This has been my go-to quote for the past year from Thomas Merton. You do not need to know precisely what is happening or exactly where it is all going. What you need is to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment and to embrace them with courage, faith, and hope. I mentioned that I went to MozFest this past October, but in 2016, I had an amazing opportunity to actually help plan the web literacy space at MozFest. Stepping into this role was definitely stepping out of my comfort zone, but I used my handy-dandy comfort zone detector to turn my first reaction of fear of the unknown into a sign that this new thing is exactly what I should be doing. I also knew that I was not on this journey alone. Being part of the Mozilla Learning Network and the Teach the Web movement has been an amazing experience. It's a community that cares deeply about empowering people of all ages to learn the most important skills of our age, the ability to read, write, and participate in the digital world. Who wouldn't want to be part of that? I attended a planning retreat in Berlin with all these amazing superhero-type people. I found the whole experience to be a time of embracing paradox. I felt the tension of hurrying up to get things done and slowing down to fully appreciate the experience. Finding opportunities to collaborate and finding time to be alone. Taking in new ideas and standing firm on my ideals. Wanting to share my ideas with a group and not daring to let my ignorance show. The result was that out of my comfort zone feeling that is both scary and exhilarating and daunting and awesome. Learning is also a paradox. I think this is especially true when you talk about learning tech. Anyone in tech knows that there is no keeping up with it, yet we've got to continue learning it so we can keep creating it. As a teacher of computer science, I know that when I introduce a new skill or tool, I am not going to know the answer to all the questions that the students will encounter. In fact, the more tech I teach, the more I become a learner alongside them. The space we created at MozFest reflected this paradox of learning and invited everyone to embrace it. Here's a description of the space we created. Demystify the web. Grab your ticket to our carnival of learning. All who enter will gain the most important skills of our age, the ability to read, write, and participate in our digital world. Mozilla Learning invites teachers and learners of all ages to join our fun house of web literacy. Embrace the unknown, experience the thrills, imagine and share the full potential of the web with everyone. Based on the demystifications and parting thoughts we got, I think our message was received. The next phase of the design thinking process is to experiment. As I said before, my first experience with design thinking was through Biomed Tech Girls. This is a week-long collaboration with Tech Girls, the Biomedical Engineering Department at UVA, and St. Anne's Belfield School. This program grew out of one of my failed experiments. I had submitted a Tech Girls proposal to the iLab at UVA, a startup incubator for UVA students and community members. I wanted to create a web storefront of STEM curricula, workshops, and services geared toward girls. My application was rejected, But David Chen remembered my idea. He's the Coulter Program Director of UVA BME, and at a chance meeting, he said he wanted to collaborate with Tech Girls. This past summer, we held the 4th annual Biomed Tech Girls program. We had 15 young women participating from 8 schools around the region. They had a broad array of interests coming into the program, including math, science, engineering, biology, nursing, robotics, and coding. During the program, participants got hands-on with creating technology, behind-the-scenes lab tour at UVA BME, and inspiration from guest speakers. They also got to solve a real-world problem through a design challenge, like improving life for an amputee or someone with cerebral palsy. On Friday afternoon, the community is invited to see what the girls created, and it is truly inspiring to see what they come up with in such a short time frame. The design challenge is also a highlight for the girls. A couple pieces of feedback that first year really stood out to me. I've never done anything like it before. All of the other engineering things I've been to always showed us other people's projects, but never got to offer us an opportunity to do a project ourselves. You gave us a real problem and expected us to come up with a good solution and even build a prototype. Normally, adults don't understand younger people are able to do this stuff. My experience learning about the design thinking process with girls and seeing how much of an impact it made on them had me thinking I really needed to bring this to St. Anne's. The thing about design thinking, though, is that you're really putting the learning in the students' hands and you don't know where it's going to end up. I knew just a teacher who would take a leap of faith with me, 8th grade science teacher Tom Weiss. Together, we created the Design Thinking and Robotics Project. For this type of assignment, it's important to identify the design constraints of the project. We brought in the robotics from the Hummingbird Robotics Kit, which I discovered at Vste several years ago. It's an amazingly versatile platform that lets you build up creations around robotics components. We also borrowed the cerebral palsy patient profile work from Biomed Tech Girls. We kicked off the day by introducing teams of students to the Hummingbird Robotics Kit and what I like to call hole-in-the-wall learning. Inspired by Sugata Mitra's hole-in-the-wall project, the idea is to get students hands-on with the kit as soon as possible and let them figure it out how to test the lights, servos, motors, and sensors. We gave them a couple handouts on connecting electronics and programming, but mostly this was a trial and error activity. Next was working on empathy. Typically, you gain empathy for your patient by getting to know them, but what if you can't interact with your patient? You could also gain empathy by trying to step into the shoes of someone with cerebral palsy. So we gave them a homework assignment to try out everyday activities with limited use of their arms. Together, we reflected on a homework experience, recording our results on the empathy map. Next, we had teams researching problems like the one their patient was experiencing. Could they find videos that showed challenges of what their patient might be facing? Could they find information on what solutions might already exist? Next, the students created need statements based on the problems their patients was facing. Each team picked one need statement to take to the next stage of brainstorming. During this stage, no idea is too crazy, and the more ideas, the better. Each team member came up with at least 5 ideas independently. After all the ideas were on the table, teams worked to narrow them down and eventually pick one solution to take to the prototype stage. Before they began to prototype, they had to draw out a design and include the materials that they'd need. Finally, we dumped a bunch of maker materials into the middle of the room, and they got to work prototyping, testing, and refining. What they ended up with and presented on day 7 of the project is kind of amazing. Here are some examples. was going to do that. You fix me again? The final step is to produce something so that you can get feedback to make it better. One thing David Chen always stresses with design thinking process is that you've got to try out your ideas and get feedback. He'll often have the biomed tech girls in the hallways of UVA trying out their ideas and getting feedback from random people that walk by. With tech girls, I started out by organizing meetups for middle school girls. Thank you. Those first months, I was lucky to get 6 girls in a room. It felt very slow going. In 2013, I found out about an event Paula White was hosting called Girls Geek Day. Since this was right up my alley, I volunteered. That first event, we had 30 girls with more than 10 volunteers offering a wide variety of STEM-related activities. Based on my previous Tech Girls experience, I knew that format was a winner. I joined Paula as a co-conspirator, and we have seen Girls Geek Day grow with feedback and collaboration from the girls, parents, and volunteers. Girls Geek Days are hosted once a month in elementary schools across the community. They are usually attended by about 50 to 70 girls with 20-plus community volunteers running activities each session. You can learn more about this program and ideas on how you might recreate it in your community at our session on Monday. One of the projects I've worked on that I think best represents testing and iterating on an idea is the Spark Hackathon. It's also a great example of super empowering kids in learning. Zach Minster, the 912 computer science coordinator, and I started the Spark Hackathon as a way to share the enthusiasm we found in students who discover computer science and coding with a thriving tech community in Charlottesville. What we discovered during the planning and running of the event is that students are eager for opportunities to collaborate with others and work on real-world problems, while the tech community is eager to hear their ideas and help them. The hackathon happens over a weekend in January, and we invite students, high school students from around the region to participate. No previous experience required. We call Saturday a Learnathon, and we recruit tech professionals to come in and teach workshops throughout the day. Here are some of the workshop selections from last year: Cities That Talk, Intro to GitHub, Social Media for Entrepreneurs, Mobile Apps, Project Management, Intro to Coding for the Web, and many more. Saturday evening, 4 sponsor companies present real-world problems, and the students self-select into teams to solve them. Last year, the focus was on IoT, the Internet of Things. And the problem statements included things like finding ways to use IoT to track patient health, using wearables to stop being distracted by your phone, and helping people with multiple sclerosis manage their social interactions. And hopefully here's a behind-the-scenes video of that. Yep, okay, here we go. Spark Hackathon was an idea that Zach and I had almost as soon as we met each other and wanted to bring it to life.
So we've got 48 high school students from the Charlottesville area. 6 different high schools are represented behind me, and all of them are here working on one of 4 problems. These problems are sponsored by local software or other firms, and these problems are sort of the public interest.
We're working on an app to help people with diabetes. Like you can set like the timer for yourself. We have so like every 3 hours you have to check in, or your emergency contact gets notified that you're not responsive. You can set that up for yourself, or if you have a button to call 911 and notify your emergency contact straight up if you notice you're starting to have like a hypoglycemic attack.
Willow Tree Apps is here sponsoring a problem on community engagement. So there are some students right now working on an application to connect people with parks that have certain lists of resources, because that information is presently very hard to obtain. Then we have Locus Health here. There's a couple of different projects being worked on. One of them is focused on making sure that elderly people keep on time and schedule with taking their medications using an application for iOS.
The other thing we're really proud of is that we have a pretty good gender balance. We have 60% male and 40% female, and that's really a great balance to have at a hackathon. And in fact, next year we're hoping we can get to 50-50.
So most of what we did today was a lot of prototyping, and especially using Photoshop to create maybe some screenshots of what our finished product might look like.
Here we have over 25 mentors that came on site to do workshops, to hang out with the teams while they're working and guide them. And so they're really able to now get connected with the kids in the community, find out how excited they are about learning computer science, as well as finding out what you can do with technology in the real world.
They're applications in the public good, but they're fully owned, designed, and created by our students. So this is totally student-centered. After being given these problems, they had a chance to form teams and create their solution that they wanted to work on. So they're totally self-organized, self-selecting.
It's been really fun because we've been able to sort of go through the entire process of design, and I think that was really interesting to learn about.
I think it's been awesome. There's so many smart people from the community here helping us. We learned so much. I learned half of 2 other programming languages, signed up for a couple workshops, learned some ways to think about things. All our screenshots for our project have been made through Sketch, which not even a clue that existed before today. We're actually programming the app in Swift for an iOS, and I wouldn't have been able to take a couple steps without coming here. I just think it's awesome. I had a great time.
What I remember most clearly from that first hackathon experience was the moment that we really handed it over to the students. We had recruited volunteers, organized the workshops, got companies on board to present problems, but at 6 p.m. on Saturday, after hearing the problems presentations, we truly handed it over to them. And it was scary and exhilarating and daunting and awesome. We're working on our 3rd annual Spark Hackathon. I really believe this is student-driven learning at its best. Last year, we brought students on as mentors, and this year we're excited that students are joining us as collaborators, planning the event and designing the process. They're helping us make the invitation more inviting. The hackathon is open to high school students across the state, so consider this an invitation for you and your students to join us January 27th and 28th. I realize that just doing it isn't always as easy as it sounds. But we are constantly asking this of our students, so modeling it is important. That's why we wanted to take the Spark Hackathon experience and bring it to educators. So this summer, St. Anne's hosted the Computer Science Institute for regional educators. If educators were willing to take a risk on computer science, we promised them 3 things: an opportunity to learn and get hands-on with computer skills and tools, to come away with the experience with a lesson plan infused with computer science that they could use this year, and the ability to connect to a community of educators that would provide support and guidance on their journey into integrating computer science. Our keynote speaker, Jeffrey Spees, the Chief Technology Officer at the Center for Open Science, was our keynote speaker, and the theme was Learning to Learn. And he was so spot on in his remarks that it gave me chills. He challenged us to rethink the frustration of failure. This is his mantra. I'm going to see if I can bring it up. Yes. Learning is frustrating. Frustration is normal. Everyone feels this way. He went on to share that women and underrepresented minorities will feel different challenges than others. They may interpret frustration more negatively. Instead of viewing frustration with tech as a cue that we're not good at it, we need to understand that it's just a normal part of the learning process. As learners, we need to fearlessly embrace the frustration of failure and believe in our ability to learn from it. This is known as a growth mindset, and it leads to a lifelong love of learning. We live in a world with a lot of problems, but we also live in a time with powerful technology tools to help us create solutions. As technology educators, we possess a superpower, the ability to inspire the next generation in technology. What I learned at the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing event really rocked my world. It sent me on a journey of discovery, observation, experimentation, and iteration. I hope something rocks your world at Vste, whether it's an amazing educator, a cool new tool, or a problem that really needs solving. And then I want you to embrace your hero's journey. Acknowledge your superpowers. Find your team. Share your story. I really want to hear it. Thank you.